Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming out on a Sunday afternoon. My name is Kyle Engelhardt, and I have the pleasure of directing Cedar Falls Jazz 1. And welcome to our beautiful new auditorium. We hope you enjoy it. How many of you are here for the first time? Good, thank you, thank you. Mr. McBride, can you hit the red button on the recorder back there? Mr. McBride is running sound. Corey McBride from 01. Yeah. Hit it twice, and then it'll turn red. Yep, thank you. Now we're recording. All right, it's our pleasure to open the concert for you. We've got 3 tunes. The first is written by an Iowa jazz composer. I thought it'd be cool to do that since that's what this afternoon is all about with IJCO here. So we're going to open with a tune by Chris Mertz, and this is titled Triple Berry. You're going to hear from Josie Berry on alto saxophone, Cohen Eichhorn on trumpet, and Ellie Smith on the tenor sax. This is Triple Berry.
Thank you.
All right, our second selection tonight is, or this afternoon, I guess, it's dark in here, who knows. Our second selection is a tune by Patty Darling, and she's the jazz composition and jazz studies professor at Lawrence University. And this is written to feature solo alto, and then in the backgrounds you'll hear some singing. So singers, sing out. All right, we have a couple all-state singers in there hiding. There are ringers, they'll be okay. But this is titled The Next Chapter, and it's kind of a modern straight tune by Patty Darling, and we're going to feature Josie. So hope you enjoy. last tune that we're going to do is new to us today. Oh, well, we started about right after spring break a couple weeks ago. And the idea was to get a tune we could learn and have fun for this show and invite a bunch of students to play that wanted to solo. So you're going to hear solos on this from Andrew Getch on guitar, Leo Steinman on trumpet, Alex Christ on alto sax, Josie again on alto sax, Ellie Smith on tenor sax, and Dominic Williams on the trombone. Big thank you to the band boosters for underwriting and supporting this concert so that all the students could come for free and so that we could pay IJCO to be here. Many of them have come from across the state to be here today, and they're not getting rich, but they are here to play and have a lot of fun, and we're excited that we get to put them in this beautiful space that our school has provided for us. So thank you to IJCO for being here. Thank you to band boosters for paying them to be here too. We're going to close with Billie's Bounce by Charlie Parker, arranged by Bill Holman. Hope you enjoy. Hey, thank you so much. We're going to take about a 7-8 minute break to switch things around, change cymbals, and get the adults big band out here. We hope you stick around. If you need to use the restroom, they're either that way or that way down just towards the wrestling room. So we'll take a quick break and then be right back in about 8 minutes.
A few minutes later.
1, 2, 3, 4.
do such amazing teaching here at the high school and throughout the entire district. I'm always just so impressed with their musical ensembles every time I hear them and the stuff they're able to do here. And of course, we thank Kyle and everybody for inviting us into your brand new space here. And a special thank you to the band boosters who said yes to making this happen. I know many of you are sitting out there and were a part of that decision. So how about a hand for those folks for making it happen for us. That first piece that we played was one by Paul McKee, who grew up in Indianola, Iowa, and is a UNI alum, great trombonist, who's about to retire from teaching at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And that's a chart that he calls Little Gus. On that one, you heard from Nolan Schrader on the tenor saxophone, Joel Nagel on the trombone, and Dave Tiki on the drum set. Nolan sadly moving this summer to Indianapolis, abandoning the band. We're all very sad about that, but we will savor every moment of Nolan that we can before that happens. This next one comes to us from another UNI alum, a more recent alum of UNI, Rishi Kalusu. And this one is called Vibrant Lights. And the soloists on this are going to be Drew Morton on the bass and Steve Wheeler on the flugelhorn. We hope you enjoy Vibrant Lights.
One more time for Nolan Schrader on the tenor saxophone. Steve Wheeler on the flugelhorn. And Drew Morton on the bass.
Okay, I need my notes for this next one. So this is something that is brand new to the band, and it comes to us from a gentleman named Emiliano Lisansky, who grew up in Iowa City, and actually, our trombonist here, Rich Med, was his band director at Iowa City West High School. And Emiliano went on to the Eastman School of Music. That's where I met him. He was a freshman when I was doing my master's degree there, so we overlapped by a little bit. Then he moved to New York City, played with all sorts of people, and then found his way to Los Angeles at the Herbie Hancock Institute. And after he finished there, he decided he liked it in LA, and he's been there ever since. And this is an appropriate chart for somebody who grew up here in Iowa and has now found himself on the West Coast, because it's sort of West Coast inspired. I wonder if anybody would get it just from the title. The title of the chart is Animal Style. Okay, are we familiar with the burger chain In-N-Out? This is a California thing. And Emiliano says, Animal Style is inspired by the secret menu item sold at In-N-Out, a famous California burger chain. An Animal Style burger includes extra Thousand Island spread, mustard and onion grilled patties, and extra pickles. Anybody getting hungry? The title is a commonly known phrase amongst Californians, apparently, and is used to describe the late-night rowdy customers, or animals. So the piece is meant to evoke some of the excitement of sort of the party atmosphere of, getting some late-night burgers with the bros in Southern California. So hopefully you get some of the Southern Cal vibe from this. It's a party, for sure, and there's a lot of notes in there. We're going to do our very best. This band, as Kyle alluded to, people are kind of coming from all over the state, so it's not like we have a regular rehearsal time or anything. We meet here and we throw it together, and then you all get to hear what happens, good or bad. So take it easy on us, all right? This one is going to feature Christopher Mertz, Director of Jazz Studies right here in Cedar Falls at UNI. You also heard his piece played by Cedar Falls High School Jazz 1, his piece Tripleberry. And in addition to Chris, you're going to hear from Dan Padley on the guitar. I hope you enjoy Emiliano Lisansky's Animal Style. Thank you so much. We'll take a moment to catch our breath here. So this one was written by one of the musicians on stage here, not a regular member of the band, but filling in tonight for John Isley, who just welcomed his third child into the world. John is a former Iowan, used to live in Decorah, but moved to Wisconsin. But we decided to not boot him out of the band when he left the state. So he's still been playing with us pretty regularly. But stepping in tonight is Sean Kiefer, a student at the University of Northern Iowa and recent finalist in the National Trumpet Competition, the jazz division. Let's hear it for Sean. Traveled down to Texas and won third place nationally. And he's also a very fine writer. This is a piece that was premiered by UNI Jazz Band 1 in the fall, and we're going to play it for you tonight. Originally written for the 2024 Telluride Jazz Festival. It says, "For My Soulmate, Kate." And these next three charts are actually all kind of dedication pieces, written for specific people. So that was written for a smaller group, and then Sean decided to expand it for jazz orchestra. And we're going to feature the composer on this one, and you'll hear a little bit more from Dan Padley as well. And now stepping into his role as conductor for the intro of this chart is our lead trumpeter, Corey Schmidt. Let's hear it for Corey. So we hope you enjoy Sean Kiefer's piece, "In Every Life." That was a piece called A Gentle Man, and it was written for Kenny Wheeler, great flugelhornist and composer who visited you and I a number of years ago. It's sort of a hero of ours in terms of jazz composition. And that piece just beautifully evokes Kenny's spirit and has the same kind of lyrical and melancholy qualities that we love in Kenny Wheeler's music. So before we go, I'm going to introduce you to the band, the people you've been listening to. So in the front row here, the saxophone section, filling in tonight for Robert Espy, that's Tyler Utter on lead alto, Jen Key on alto saxophone, Christopher Ricks on tenor saxophone, Nolan Schrader on tenor saxophone, and Simon Harding on baritone saxophone. Oh, this was a pretty merciful gig in terms of doubles. I don't see the usual, just piles of clarinets and flutes in the front. Though the bass clarinet did make an appearance. And behind the saxes, in the trombone section, Anthony Williams on lead trombone, Rich Med, Joel Nagel, and Cedar Falls High School alum, Michael Stowe playing bass trombone. Though when he walked into this building, he didn't seem to know where to go. I'm not sure what that's about. In the trumpet section, playing lead for us for a couple more months at least, Corey Schmidt. Let's hear for Corey. That's Dave Brennan, Sean Kiefer, and on the end, Steve Wheeler, the trumpets. And my friends in the rhythm section here from Iowa City, give it up for Dan Padley on guitar. And somebody I've been playing with since junior high, no joke, we grew up in the Quad Cities together, Drew Morton on the bass. Somebody I've been playing with since undergrad, Dave Teedy on the drums. My name is Mike Conrad. We often play at least a chart of mine on these concerts, but not tonight. So if you want to hear some of my music, come to hear us in Cedar Rapids at Kirkwood Community College on May 7th, and I'm sure we'll do a couple more things there. We're going to do just one more for you tonight, and this one is, I think, a pretty new piece from Bob Washington, who was a very important teacher to me and to so many on the stage. Still lives right here in Cedar Falls. Taught at the University of Northern Iowa for 38 years. And this is something that was commissioned by the Jazz Education Network, just known as JEN often. And it's a really fun little piece, Caribbean flavor to it. And we're going to invite a guest who has already joined us on stage here, now teaching percussion at the University of Northern Iowa. Give it up for Stacy Toma. And Stacy will be featured a little bit on this last one, as well as Tyler Utter on the alto saxophone. I'm going to play a little keyboard solo on this, and then you'll get to hear from Simon Harding on the Barry sax. Join me in thanking one more time Kyle Engelhardt, Gerald Ramsey, everybody at Cedar Falls High, including the boosters who made this happen. Thank you all for being here, and thank you band for playing so great. Hope you enjoy Alma Caravania.
So good.